one of the greatest shames I have is continuing to interact with him after I suspected I knew the truth. What's up, Ryan? How you doing today, man? Good to talk to you.
Yeah, man. Been a while. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
I mean, all things considered, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to jump on because there's this thing that Destiny said to me the last time I debated him that like really stuck with me, because I was on there and I was arguing the point, funnily enough, the one you just referenced that you and I disagree on, which I don't think we need to get into. But basically he had said next time the Dems have power, they should investigate everyone. They should put everyone in prison. They should do X, Y, and Z. And I came on to say, well, if that's true, then you're calling for sweeping pardons. You're saying that the president should just pardon everyone. Is that what you're, if you believe that, that's the consequence. And he was losing that argument because it's not, obviously he doesn't want that. He doesn't want sweeping pardons. So it put him in an awkward spot. So he wrong-footed me, and I'll admit he wrong-footed me. But the way he did it is he goes, well, Trump's fucking evil. He's evil. And he just switched to this diatribe about Trump being evil. And, you know, he was on CNN. He called Charlie Kirk Satan spawn, right? And the thing that got to me, after all this happened, I was thinking about that conversation I had. And what is the proper use of violence if not to combat evil? Like what is violence for if not that, right? And the comfort that people have in just saying that like this guy's evil, Charlie Kirk is evil, Trump is evil. Like, well, what is the implication there? And I think that like I don't understand how somebody with a platform his size can say that and feel comfortable with that, because I mean, I don't know what the shooter's motives is. We're learning more and more every day. And certainly the fascist catch this seems to have a pretty strong fucking implication. And then you got, as I think your previous callers were well mentioning, you have universities that are teaching that speech equals violence. Mm-hmm. And if speech equals violence, then violence is a correct response to speech you don't like, because they're the same thing. So I do think that this moment is exposing a very bad idea, and we need to find ways to mobilize on that bad idea and talk about it and pinpoint it and not let this moment slip, because I think this really is exposing like a fundamental flaw in the way that people approach politics and the worldview that especially someone like Destiny is espousing. And I don't know, I want your views on like what's the best way to like make that point and to like make it clean and pithy.
So here's the thing. I don't necessarily, I think that there is a claim of stochastic terrorism that we could point to, that when for years and years, you say someone is a Nazi or a fascist and their supporters are Nazis or fascists, and then simultaneously there are serious conversations about the need to use violence against those sorts of people, that people in positions that should know better are basically, should know that the consequences of what they're saying, or, they secretly want those, or they outright say it, as we're seeing some people are outright saying. However, I still hesitate to say that. If I truly believe that George Bush is a war criminal, and I think it's evil, the shit that happened to innocent people over there, should I not be allowed to say that? Of course. I think that if you're going to speak like that, and I do, I just said that this ideology is evil that we're facing. It's not to say the specific person, it's to say the ideology that's running rampant. But I did. Last night I put pictures of people on TikTok that were smiling and laughing and celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, and I said this is evil. So I'd be a hypocrite to say, well, I haven't said similar things. Of course I am. But I'm very careful to constantly talk about the need for nonviolence and the need that there are things that are more important than sinking to that level and that disgust. And it's not a matter of saying if something's evil, then violence is always justified. Vengeance will be the Lord's, right? We could use a state apparatus. We've come together as a civil society and said there are ways that we have to do things. That we've given the state a monopoly on force, and I think that that's good, largely. Now, there are obviously exceptions, self-defense, claims like that we don't have to get into, but it is, I could look at someone and say, I think you're a disgusting, evil person, and it does not mean that I seek to cause them physical harm, right? It might not even mean that I want to think about them at all. If they're committing things that we as a society have push for that violate a legal precedent, then they should be aggressively pursued. But other than that, I just choose to not interact with them. Destiny, what makes what they're doing unique is that he sees the radical nature of the young, impressionable people in his crowd, and he doesn't give a fuck. And for me, one of the greatest shames I have is continuing to interact with him after I suspected I knew the truth. And there was 2 reasons that I interacted with him. One, because I feel that he still has a lot of pull in Democratic circles, and that there are people that are using the excuse that because of allegations against him, people are afraid to debate him, and they're pointing to that. I'm not afraid to debate him. I'll debate his ideas any day of the week. I just did it the other day and was proud that I handled him pretty successfully. However, the other reason that I debated him was deep down, I'm naive. Deep down, I want to see the best in people, particularly the people that I have relationships with, right? And so even people that are scumbags in real life, right, that maybe it's like someone that's a deadbeat that didn't pay child support or something that I know in real life when I used to bartend, I still wanted to see the best in them. Whereas if I just read that story in the newspaper and it's just a name and you're just reading the alleged crime, you don't really have that sympathy because you don't see the person there. And those 2 factors, I think, involved me wanting to see the best in Destiny and wanting to show that as someone who I think is a competent debater on the left that I could deal with his ideas. And that will be to my everlasting shame, because deep down I knew the truth. All of the jokes aside, all of the, Corey Competore jokes, even the Charlie Kirk jokes, the truth is when brass tacks hit, when his co-host Pisco asked him straight up after the assassination of Donald Trump, did you want that bullet to kill Trump? And his response was, I don't know what I could say because of TOS, but the worst thing that could happen was the bullet not killing him. That should have been the end. A precursor to free speech and debate is that you don't want to kill me or enact violence on me if you disagree with my ideas. And if I can't trust that that metric's being met, if I think you want to kill the politicians that I support, if I think you think that I am evil enough that violence would be justified, that you would mock my death, then I choose not to engage with you. And so for me, that's what sets Destiny apart. You could go to his Reddit after that assassination of Donald Trump, and you could watch the rhetoric being repeated by young, impressionable people in his audience saying, well, the Supreme Court basically had this erroneous decision that made Trump God King. We tried to deal with it through legal metrics, so now, and that's the mentality that so many of these young people have. Destiny should have an obligation to tell his audience when he's, I don't mind him saying, I think Trump's fascist, I think Trump's evil. He absolutely has that right. I disagree with him vehemently, but he has the right to say that. But when you're going to speak like that, and there's so many people that you know are impressionable that are listening, you should go out of your way to instruct that, listen, clearly we're not advocating for violence and things of that nature.
I mean, you have to say that. You have to say it because, like, we're running out of rhetorical room. You know what I mean? Like, remember when Mitt Romney was supposedly a sexist and John McCain was supposedly a racist? There's some room between racist and evil, right? Like there's some runway left. When you get to like, you're a Nazi, you're evil, there's no runway left, right? So if you don't follow up your evil with, and I mean, like, I don't mean violently, like, please don't oppose them with violence. Like there's not many stronger adjectives you could use. And so as we're reaching this point, I agree with you, by the way, he has the absolute right to say it. I'd defend him in court if it came to it. Like, I'm not talking about a legal issue. I'm just saying, as a civil society, as like trying to have some kind of country left. It's like, I think you're right. If you're going to use language that's that strong, you really do need to disclaim it, as you've been disclaiming it on this show, with periodic, and I don't mean violence, because if you say somebody is Satan's spawn, it's pretty easy to interpret that as, well, we'd all be better off if they weren't with us. And if you couple that with, and again, I just want to focus because I do think there's a shell game that gets played a little bit on the left here, because left politicians, I will grant anybody, are more careful about not using extreme rhetoric than politicians on the right are. I don't think that's even close. But they're careful while there's a whole machine behind them saying speech equals violence. These people are fascists. The ADL is put Charlie Cook on hate watch lists, right? Southern Poverty Law Center listed him as a hate group. And if speech is violence and hate speech is violence, then Charlie Kirk's the most violent guy alive. And so there's a danger, I think, on twofold. One, we have to be careful to make sure that we aren't falling into the trap that's being set, where we're, I think, saying something that could be interpreted as a call to violence. I think we obviously have to be careful about that. And then the other one is, I think that we need to be sharp in pointing out that their ideas do have consequences. If you teach people that speech is violence, they're going to use violence to stop speech.
That's right.
But
that's intent.
Of course they would.
That's intentional, though. Like, there's certainly most of the people that are teaching that know what they're doing, right? Now, I'd want to say one more thing on this. Just calling someone evil, believe it or not, I don't think it's as bad as calling someone a Nazi or saying that speech is violence, because the difference is evil is sort of like a metric of the morality of someone, but doesn't speak to the possible dangers of them. Nazi's different. Nazi's implying evilness, but also saying that there's this implication of the force that they're going to enact on you because they are Nazis, just like the Nazis. So, for example, when you hear someone like Vosh, let me give a better example than Vosh. Someone in Destiny's orbit, at least formerly, that I trusted is more like stoic than Destiny, more analytic, was Lonerbox. Right? Lonerbox's smart dude. I enjoyed the brief amount of conversations I've had with him. After the assassination of Trump, and all of this rhetoric came from Destiny, and this was before him and Destiny had their initial falling out over some allegations, Lonerbox, in that environment, who I thought was the less hyperbolic of them, just puts a post out that says, at what point should we have assassinated Hitler? Now, it's clear the implications of what he's saying there. Like Vosh, for example, talked about a trans genocide that is ongoing and that we need to take pot shots at people like Patriot Prayer. And then when he was pushed back by the left-wing host that was interviewing him, said, well, shouldn't we have stopped Hitler before he came into power? The implication of this isn't just you're evil. I can accept them thinking I'm evil. The leftists thought we were evil. Study after study shows this for a long time. Right? Jonathan Haidt at Heterodox Academy has done immaculate research on this, where it's like, the right thinks the left's wrong, and the left thinks the wrong's evil. And I can accept that. There's dangers in that, and we should talk through it, but I can accept that. But the difference is saying you're evil, and therefore, we're allowed to use force upon you. Therefore, it is morally righteous to do everything necessary to stop you, because you are evil. My question to you, Ryan, if I showed you a clip right now of a third grade teacher laughing her ass off saying Charlie Kirk had this coming, would you call that evil?
What I call her behavior evil?
Yeah.
I'd certainly call it immoral. I'm a lawyer. I'm like really predisposed to being super careful with my language. So that I'm maybe it's unfair of me to hold other people to that standard, because that is kind of just like,
well, that's fair, but I would call it evil.
Yeah.
But the implication that I'm making is not, oh, that's evil, and therefore these are the physical actions we should take. That's not my claim.
I think you actually hit the nail on the head, and maybe this is the way I'm going to start talking about it. It's the combination of two things. Like Jonathan Haidt's a great example. He had a not like a debate, but like a respectful academic conversation with a woman named Lisa Feldman Barrett. I think it was like 2020, 2021, like around the BLM time period. And she was asked, is speech violence? And she said, yes. Right. So it's like, I mean, so like there is a wing in, I think Toni Morrison said speech is violence. Like this is not an uncommon thing, within academic circles. But if you combine those two things, right, those two concepts, then you actually do equal a call to violence. If you're saying, I am calling this person evil, and I believe that speech is violent. And why are they evil? Because they say evil things. That means they are doing violent things. I don't think anyone, even if you're drawing the distinctions as we do differently, would say, that person is evil and they are doing violence, they should be stopped. That's obviously a call to violence, right?
That's right. And this is going to be important to you as an attorney, but I think to all of us, we can understand this. When we talk about violence and the unacceptable nature of it, there are clear exceptions, as I already said here. Self-defense is one of those. Yeah. You as an attorney would say you're perfectly within your moral and legal rights if someone aggresses at you and starts punching, that you could defend yourself, right? Now, there's obvious nuances to what the level of defense, etc. But in general, the theory is you have the right to use physical violence to defend yourself from imminent physical violence or violence that's already occurring. If they think speech is violence, then there is the reason that it's an obvious call to violence is it's a call to self-defense in their twisted fucking head. We are currently having violence enacted upon us. Therefore, the violence we use wasn't initiated by us. It is merely self-defense. And that's why it's a call to violence. I'm not saying that. The woman that's on TikTok that I'm calling evil, that's laughing about the death of Charlie Kirk, is not enacting violence upon me because I don't think that her speech is violence. I think it's fucking repugnant. I think that she has no right teaching our children. I think people have the right to know that these are her beliefs while she's teaching children, and that the school should have to answer for whether or not they think that's accountable. But never would I suggest that individuals enact personal violence, because I don't think that her act of words are violence. Nor do I think that about Vaj, nor do I think that about Destiny. Now, is there a point where legally and morally words could get to the point where you say that it is such a direct call to violence that perhaps there's legal action that would be necessary? Of course. You can't come on and directly tell people to physically harm.
There's such thing as fighting words. Right?
That's right.
Like I bet, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer in this state. I'm not making a legal analysis, but like those kids who had a memorial for Charlie Kirk, and the guy rode through on a scooter and started taunting them about Charlie Kirk's death, and they just threw him a beating. If they stopped quickly, I think they probably have a decent fighting words defense.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if I was at a funeral for my mother and someone came up to me at the funeral and called her a whore, you're getting a beat down. Like, I mean, like you're going to get hit. Like, that's just, I think we all understand what that is.
And there is a difference between morality and legally, because most people would say, as long as you didn't go too far, even if you got charged with some sort of crime, that morally we understand it.
Yeah,
right.
We get where you're coming from.
But this is a completely different thing. And you know, I will let you go on this. I'll give you the final word. I think that we have the shocking nature of this is how ubiquitous this sort of runs throughout academia, and how it's buttressed, not just by Democratic politicians, but more importantly, people that have controlled the narrative, like in mainstream media. I mean, even tonight, we're going to go through a lot of examples, but for God's sakes, Charlie Kirk, the blood's barely cleaned up, and the New York Times writing a piece saying that he's quoted as saying anti-Semitic things. Then the next day, they're forced to issue a retraction that's like, our bad. It turns out he did quote that anti-Semitic thing and then push back on it. And so, like, that's the gut reaction from so many of people in these positions of power is like, yeah, but look at the bad shit he said. It's like this equivocation. They're not directly coming out, and I'm not blaming the New York Times or CNN or anything like that, saying that they're directly responsible or legally culpable. But what I'm saying is they go in that direction of, when this occurs to someone who they ideologically despise, they're like, well, yeah, but maybe he shouldn't have been talking. Maybe she shouldn't have wore that short dress in that neighborhood. And that's where we're at. And I find it completely disgusting. And again, I'm not advocating for things above and beyond the scope of the law or for individual vigilante action. But I think as a society and culturally, the things that we could choose to shame and to celebrate and to embrace and to be part of and spend our money on and spend our energy on, I think that we should start to hold that to account. And, you know, that a reckoning needs to occur within that framework.
Yeah, and I'm going to leave you with a thought. It would just be that, like, the idea that speech equals violence is fundamentally un-American. We didn't have a revolution against the English because they said mean things about us, right? Like, we fundamentally understand as a society that we are unique in that we have the most freedom of speech and the most guns. And we are the kind of country where that has to work. And the way that works is we understand that people will say shit that really makes you upset. And that is not going to be a call to violence. You have to live with it in anything other than like the most egregious fighting word scenarios that we've been talking about. And I think the best possible thing to focus on, which would be an amazing legacy for Charlie, is if we collectively, meaning people who care about those values, refocused on education, because this area has been ceded to communists and Marxists and un-American people who do not care about our fundamental values. And an effort needs to be made, just like there was an effort in the alt media and in traditional media now to have diversity of opinion and different voices. An effort needs to be made in education to promote different values, because what we have right now is not working.
Yeah. All right, Ryan. Well, hey, you stay safe. Thanks for calling in, man. I appreciate it.
See you, man. Always a pleasure.
All right.